What if the butterflies you keep calling chemistry are actually your nervous system recognizing a wound? Sure, it's a confronting question, but one that changes everything once you really sit with it. We've been taught to trust the spark, to follow the pull, to believe that intensity means something deeper, something rare. We build entire stories around it. We call it fate, connection, chemistry, even love. But what if it really isn't alignment? What if it's a kind of familiarity? What if your body isn't recognizing someone new, but something it has already learned how to survive? Maybe something you've learned to be comfortable with? Welcome to Signals and Standards with Suzie, where we unpack the deeper psychology behind attraction, emotional patterns, self worth, emotional intelligence, and those hidden dynamics shaping your relationships. Today's conversation is about learning to tell the difference between what feels intense and what is actually healthy. Because once you see the difference, you really can't unsee it. By the end of this episode, you will understand why you keep getting pulled towards certain relationship dynamics, how emotional conditioning shapes attraction, and how to start choosing alignment over emotional survival patterns. Stay with us. Welcome to Signals and Standards with Suzie, where we decode mixed messages, elevate your standards, and deliver practical insights that you can act on. I'm your empowerment coach, Suzie, here to guide you from confusion to clarity, helping you reclaim your power and create the relationships and life you deserve. Let's start with a truth most people don't realize right away. We don't always choose what's best for us emotionally. We choose what our nervous system already understands. That's what makes this conversation so uncomfortable and so freeing at the same time. Because suddenly, so many confusing relationship patterns begin to make sense. If love once felt unpredictable, emotionally distant, inconsistent, or maybe something you had to work hard to receive, your body may begin associating those feelings with connection itself. Not because they're healthy, but because they're familiar. And the nervous system does not automatically prioritize happiness or peace or calm or even emotional health first. It prioritizes survival and recognition. Familiarity can feel safer than the unknown, even when the familiar thing is hurting you. That explains why someone can genuinely say they want emotional availability, consistency, reassurance, honesty, and stability, and then feel strangely disconnected when they finally experience it. Because what they're actually missing is not connection, they're missing activation. Their body became accustomed to emotional highs and lows, tension and relief, unpredictability and reward. It's familiar and normal for them. So when a relationship feels calm, grounded, and emotionally steady, the brain can misinterpret that absence of anxiety or drama as absence of chemistry. And that realization changes everything. Because, and here's a mic drop moment, a lot of people are not addicted to love and romance. They're addicted to the emotional cycle attached to uncertainty. The waiting, the wondering, the analyzing, the relief after finally getting attention or reassurance. That cycle creates intensity, and intensity is often mistaken for intimacy. But intensity is not intimacy. Anxiety is not attraction, and emotional obsession is not proof of compatibility. Sometimes it's simply your nervous system reacting to inconsistency. This is why emotionally unavailable people can feel so magnetic and interesting. People call them mysterious, exciting, independent, hard to read, but sometimes what feels exciting is actually emotional distance mixed with unpredictability. And unpredictability keeps the nervous system engaged. The smallest moments of validation suddenly feel amplified because they arrive inconsistently. Your brain begins chasing the next emotional reward, similar to how intermittent reinforcement works psychologically. The relationship becomes emotionally consuming, not because it's deeply aligned, but because your nervous system stays activated trying to secure certainty. And social media quietly reinforces this confusion all the time. We're constantly sold the idea that real love is obsessive, dramatic, overwhelming, all consuming. If there isn't chaos, emotional intensity, fireworks, or constant butterflies, people assume something is missing. But healthy connection often feels quieter than people expect. Not boring, safe. There's a difference. A healthy relationship usually doesn't leave you emotionally exhausted from decoding mixed signals. It doesn't require you to constantly monitor someone's energy or analyze every text message or question where you stand. It allows your nervous system to exhale. And for someone used to emotional unpredictability, that calmness can initially feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. That's why so many people walk away from emotionally healthy situations while running straight back toward emotionally unavailable dynamics. Not because they consciously want pain, but because their body already knows how to emotionally operate inside chaos. Healthy love requires a different level of emotional safety, and many people have never actually experienced that consistently before. Another important part of this conversation is understanding how deeply these patterns shape our entire lives, not just romantic relationships. You see it in friendships where someone overgives, overfunctions, or emotionally carries everyone because they unconsciously believe their value comes from what they provide rather from who they are. You see, in the workplace too, where people desperately seek approval from emotionally unavailable leaders because it mirrors old emotional conditioning around earning validation. You see it in communication patterns where someone tolerates chronic disappointment while calling themselves patient, understanding, or low maintenance. A lot of people are not actually asking, does this relationship feel healthy? They're asking, how do I finally make this person choose me? And that changes the entire dynamic. Because once love becomes something you believe you must earn, relationships stop being about connection and start becoming emotional performance. You try harder, you over explain more, you over accommodate more, you shrink your needs, you confuse self abandonment with loyalty, and eventually, exhaustion starts feeling normal. That's not chemistry. That's survival mode wearing a romantic disguise. One of the best ways to understand emotional familiarity is to imagine hearing an old song you grew up with. Even if the song carries painful memories, your body still recognizes the rhythm immediately. There's comfort and recognition, and that's how emotional patterns work too. We often return to emotional environments our nervous system already knows the lyrics to, even when those environments are unhealthy. Meanwhile, a healthy connection can initially feel emotionally unfamiliar because there's no chaos to prepare for. No constant emotional decoding, no hypervigilance, no chasing reassurance, just consistency, clarity, even steadiness. And for someone who learned to associate love with unpredictability, that quietness can feel almost suspicious at first. Research on attachment styles and emotional conditioning continues to show that early relational experiences shape emotional responses, coping mechanisms, stress regulation, and relationship patterns throughout adulthood. That means even deeply intelligent, self-aware people can still repeat emotional cycles without even realizing how much of their attraction is connected to conditioning instead of compatibility. But awareness changes things because your patterns are not your identity. In fact, they are learned emotional responses, and anything learned can be questioned. That's where your power begins. Not in being a victim, not in blaming yourself for your past, not in blaming your parents forever, not in turning every old wound into your permanent identity. The power comes from becoming conscious enough to pause before automatically repeating the pattern again. So the next time you feel instantly attached to someone, pause before calling it chemistry. Ask yourself, what exactly feels familiar here? Is this emotional safety or emotional unpredictability I've normalized? Is my body calm or activated? That pause matters more than people realize because it gives you something emotional conditioning rarely gives you automatically: a choice. I remember a time in my own life that made this impossible to ignore. I used to describe emotionally unavailable people as mysterious and exciting. Then one day I met someone who was emotionally clear, kind, grounded, and consistent. And instead of instantly relaxing to it, it made me feel really uncomfortable, awkward even. The moment stopped me in my tracks because I realized I wasn't chasing love. I was chasing emotional recognition. My nervous system knew chaos better than peace at that point in my life. But the deeper, harder truth was this: it wasn't just bad luck that kept leading me there. I had to admit to myself that I was making choices that reinforced those patterns. That realization was so uncomfortable, though. But you know what? It was also very empowering because it meant I could choose differently. I had the choice, I had the power, I had to make the right choice. Once I saw that clearly, I started to take responsibility for my patterns instead of blaming circumstances and bad luck. That's when I sought out therapy, not because something was wrong with me, but because I wanted to understand why chaos felt so familiar to me and to learn how to feel safe in something much healthier. And from there, I began making different choices with much better outcomes. And maybe that's the transformation nobody talks about enough. Healing is not always becoming someone completely new. Sometimes healing is simply becoming aware enough to stop letting old wounds make present day decisions for you. So before we close today, I want you to sit with this. I choose aligned connection. Repeat it. I choose aligned connection. I choose aligned connection. Let's say it again. I choose aligned connection. Because aligned connections feel different. It doesn't keep you confused. It doesn't make you constantly question your worth. It doesn't require emotional self-abandonment to maintain closeness. It allows you to exhale. That affirmation matters because the more consciously you choose emotional alignment, the less attractive dysfunction begins to feel. You stop confusing anxiety for attraction and inconsistency for depth. You begin recognizing that peace is not emptiness, that stability is not boredom, and that clarity is not lack of chemistry. Your instincts are powerful, but they are not always healed. And sometimes self-trust doesn't mean following every emotional feeling immediately. Sometimes self-trust means slowing down long enough to ask where the feeling is actually coming from. Because sometimes intuition is wisdom, and sometimes it's conditioning. Emotional growth is learning the difference. And the moment you do, you stop chasing emotional familiarity and start choosing relationships that genuinely support your peace, your self-worth, and your future, including the relationship you have with yourself. Thank you for being here today. Maybe the biggest takeaway is this. Not everything that feels intense is healthy, and not everything healthy feels intense right away. Sometimes what we call chemistry is really conditioning. Catch Signals and Standards with Suzie on your favorite podcast platforms and connect with me at powercoachsuzie.com for more grounded empowerment and relationship conversations. Until next time, stop confusing anxiety for attraction and chaos for chemistry. Your peace deserves a place in those relationships you choose. See you next time. For daily inspiration and practical advice, find me on social media at powercoachsuzie. Got questions or ideas for the show? Head to powercoachsuzie.com where you can connect with me, explore the blog, or learn more about what I do. This is Suzie signing off. Until next time, keep reading the signals and never, ever lower your standards.